I'm glad you said that because that was one of the things I thought about right from the beginning. You actually mentioned that, freedom can actually be defined very differently for different people. And one of the definitions that might come across is like, what am I just supposed to like let my leads be free and I should not put in processes to convert them? Or should I just let all my staff do whatever they want? And it sounds like anarchy is what how do we make sure that that's not the way it's being interpreted right now?
Well, I'm glad you've asked. At my company, WorldBlu, Jason, we have worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of top brands around the world, from Zappos to Groupon to WD-40 to DaVita, HCL Technologies, literally all over the world. And what we've helped them do is implement systems and processes that are based on the principles of freedom and organizational democracy rather than fear and control. Most entrepreneurs, as they're building their companies, because we don't know any better, we just default into that command and control hierarchical way of doing things. I've had entrepreneurs, I was just with a whole bunch of entrepreneurs, VC funded in Dallas recently, working with them. And they're like, wow, we never really thought that there's another way. There's another way to go from that hierarchical. I was like, my new thing I thought of, Jason, is instead of being hierarchical, we're going to be this with the heart. The heart. We're going to go from this to this.
I wasn't sure if you were going hard or you were going like infinity sign as well.
I realize that's kind of cheesy, but the other day I was like, so, and I don't mean that in sort of this utopian, everyone kumbaya kind of way, but we have to be very intentional about the way we build and scale our companies in order to have that growth. And if you're doing systems and processes that are in that command and control hierarchical way, ultimately you're going to hit roadblocks to the growth, and you're creating an environment that's not as engaging for people, and it's not bringing out their fullest potential. So what I've done for 26 years now is work with the best and brightest companies to actually implement systems and processes that shift them from being hierarchical to being much more freedom centered. Well, how do you do that? What's the framework for freedom? The framework for freedom is actually organizational democracy, not organizational hierarchy, organizational democracy. Well, what the heck is democracy? I mean, this is the thing, Jason, right? You and I know, just turn on the news. The world's on fire over democracy. What the heck is democracy, right? And I spent 10 years researching what exactly is democracy. And I love it when, I've traveled all over the world like you, Jason. I'm always asking people, what do you think democracy is? And people, oh, wow, what is this thing that people get so passionate about and so riled up about? Does democracy mean voting? What if you only have one choice? Is that a vote? Is that democracy? They vote in North Korea. They have one choice. Is that democracy? No. So democracy isn't voting. I used to think when I started down this path that democracy was old white guys in politics in Washington, D.C. No, democracy is actually a system of leadership. It's a style of leadership, just like there's servant leadership, right? Or there's authoritarian leadership. There's democratic leadership. When you look at the root of the word democracy, demos and kraton, it means power to the people. So democracy is about creating environments that give power to the people. But when we give power to the people, that's not in a selfish way. I mean, who's empowering, right? We ultimately are empowering ourselves. We're finding the power within each one of us. And we have to do that in a way that both respects and values the individual and the collective. So in my research, which I've been very blessed to have it cited by dozens, if not hundreds of academic publications, my own book and whatnot, is that there's 10 principles that create that democratic framework. Principles like transparency, accountability, decentralized power and choice. And when you put those principles into operation as systems and processes, which is what we do, that's where you get that skyrocketed growth for companies.
No, I really love this. And now you're taking me back because I know I went through some of your certification trainings. And for everybody, I'll make sure there's a link for you to go and explore WorldBlu's free tools, etc., because there's so many of them that can help you get into this mindset, which, Traci has talked about how that's the big first step. And it just allowed me to be a very different kind of leader. And I get to put these tools into practice in organizations that I consult now. But as you're talking about democracy, I have to say, you mentioned democracy, and one of the first thing that comes to mind is one of these short videos on TikTok or whatever of Osho, who's just talking about democracy, and he's like, democracy is by the people, for the people, and then he says, but the problem with democracy is that the people are retarded. And he's like a guru who says that, and it's
Right.
just such a great mic drop moment, and it's funny. And I find democracy is actually being challenged because a lot of people are like, oh my god, but so many people that get to vote with this perspective of democracy don't have a full understanding of what they're voting for and an appreciation. So how can democracy work in the workplace when a lot of times we see democracy fail in the way that we understand it today?
Well, I think so. I'm glad you asked that question. So, first of all, when you look at, well, what are the principles that actually create democracy? As I've said in my research, and what we've been able to prove is there's 10 principles. And guess what? I think, Jason, is the absolute most important principle of all is the principle of integrity. If you
Mm.
have a system where, yeah, we have transparency, yeah, we have decentralized power, yeah, we have all that, but you do not have people who have integrity, who have moral courage, who know how to do the right thing, democracy does not work. It will not work. Okay. So I think the reason, people like to bash on democracy, or people will say to me, yeah, but what about, Winston Churchill said it's, the best, worst form of government out there. But you know what? Winston Churchill and many, many millions of people died fighting for democracy in World War II. Because I think it is our divine right to be free. But how do you do that? How do you structure it? And I think that's, dare I say, I think one of the biggest contributions that I hope I'm making to the world is actually defining what democracy is. It is not just a singular act, it's actually a system. And so we have to take those principles and put them into operation. But if people, as citizens, whether they're citizens of a country or citizens of a company, are not acting from integrity, are not having the moral courage to do the right thing, it will not work. So you have to have all 10 of these principles. And Jason, we have an assessment tool that actually evaluates the level of freedom and democracy in the design of a company. And we show them how to strengthen that. We're the only company in the world that does this that I'm aware of. But it really does come down to us being better people. And right now, we need to friggin' become better people. We have got to up our game, in my humble opinion.
Thank you so much for listening to the Selling with Love podcast. We have some previous episodes you can tune into right here. And if you prefer the short form content where you get to the point in under 10 minutes, we do have a ton of clips from our best episodes that are being shared on this channel as well. So pick which one supports you the most. And of course, thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course, selling with love.